God made Moses a very specific prophet with very specific things that God intended for him to do. Welcome to the first season of the Pink Fish Podcast. I'm your host, Hailey, and I am so glad that you are here. The Pink Fish Podcast is a Christian living podcast that focuses on casting the light of Christ on women across the world. This very first season of the Pink Fish Podcast is about transitional seasons in life. We will learn about how to lean on the Lord and seek Him as your constant, even when life isn't exactly what you're used to. So, let's swim right in. Change is something that has just been really hard for me. Ever since I can remember, change has been something that I've just struggled with. When I graduated high school, I was really kind of sad about it. So after graduation, my school did this thing where they collected donations from a bunch of businesses in the community. And then us as a senior class, after graduation, we went to this big kind of like lock-in at our high school. And we all competed in all these different games to win all this money. Like we would do the chicken dance and people would throw money at us. We had like this Vegas casino room where we could just win money that people in the community had donated. And they kind of did this as like a way to just keep seniors out of trouble after graduating. And I really benefited from it because I got a lot of cool prizes and I got to spend like this last hurrah with all of my friends. And it was just such a great and like such a sweet time. And I remember when one of my friends dropped me off at home at 6 a.m. afterwards, just being like so devastated and so sad about the change that was happening because things were just going to be really different. And like a part of me knew that it was a really good thing. Like you can't stay in high school forever, but it just made it really sad for me. And so, yeah, change has just been something that I've struggled with, even when it's something that's exciting, like graduating high school and moving on to the next phase of life. And change has been something that I just keep experiencing. Part of being a human is you experience change all of the time. So after graduation, I ended up moving out of my parents' house. And since then, I have lived in 10 different places. And so from the time I was 18 to 22, I've lived in 10 different places. So I've experienced a lot of change, even though it's something that I don't like or not necessarily something that I'm good at embracing. It's something that I've just had to kind of learn how to deal with. Just like another example, even when I was engaged and being ready to be married, like I was so excited to marry Xavier. It was something I was really looking forward to, but it was a season that still came with some difficulties just because it was going to be different and things were going to change. And I just think that part of this problem for me stems from I just really enjoy the things that I do in life and I enjoy the seasons that I'm in. And I feel like once you kind of get comfortable in a season and you're like, okay, I got this, then it's kind of time for the next season to come. And so that's something that I have just had to work through. The reason that I'm bringing up this topic of change at all is because the very first season of the Pink Fish Podcast is just going to be about transitional periods of life. We're going to be talking to women from literally all over the world who have experienced a big transition in life or who are currently in a really big transition in life right now. And we're going to ask them for their advice on how to walk alongside the Lord even when things around them are different than before. And we'll hear from guests like Lydia Todd, who is one of my best friends, and she just recently moved to London to become a foreign missionary. And we'll hear from Joe Kelly, another good friend of mine from New Zealand, who has transitioned from a religion of New Ageism, of witchcraft, and is now a Christian. And then we'll also hear from my friend Victoria and Amber, who moved across the entire country to build a women's ministry. And then there are even more people that we're going to be talking to who are just going to share so much wisdom with us about transitional seasons and periods in life. And my prayer is that just in each of these stories, some part of their journey relates to something you've experienced or may be experiencing right now, so that you can know that you are not alone. Satan can use seasons of change to isolate us and just make us feel like no one understands or gets us. And I pray that this season of interviews just combats that lie for you. And I pray that you just can acknowledge that no one has it together. No one has it all together. And we are all facing our own battles. Another prayer that I have is that in hearing these testimonies, you are better equipped to love others in your life who are going through similar seasons of transition. Even if some of these seasons are times of change that you're never going to go through or you've never experienced yourself, I just pray that you're better equipped to know how to better serve those who are going through something similar and be a good friend to them. I feel like this topic is just so timely and important right now because we're entering the spring season. And in spring comes a lot of different changes for a lot of different people. Whether it's a new job, a new school, graduating, a new marriage, a lot of change happens in the spring. And what originally got me thinking about this topic in the first place was graduating from college last spring. Graduating comes with so much change. It can be really, really exciting, but it can also be really hard, just like graduating high school. And so while I was still in college, I had friends who had graduated college before me, and they told me what a difficult season post-grad is. And they definitely were not wrong. It's a really, really hard season. It's definitely up there in my top hardest seasons, and I think it's kind of that way for a lot of people in post-grad. But the thing is, even though it's a problem for a lot of people and something that a lot of people struggle with, I haven't really seen a lot of information out there or advice on how to handle this type of change. So to kick off this season of change, I'll just be sharing with you guys just vulnerably and honestly what the post-grad season has been like for me. And this is a season that I'm not even completely out of yet. But with so many people about to graduate next month, I thought I'd just share what the Lord has taught me through this season and also just validate the feelings that those stepping into post-grad are feeling. We live in this world where so many people are just posting their highlights on social media, and it may seem like those you graduate with are living their best lives and aren't struggling at all, but I'm here to tell you that that is just not the case. Graduating from college, like I said, it's a really great thing. It's such a big accomplishment, and it's something that students prepare for 4 years. But graduation can also come with possibly a lot of mixed emotions and uncertainties, and I just want to create a space to really acknowledge that. So like I said, I'm going to share with you guys just vulnerably and honestly what the post-grad season has been like for me. And then towards the end of this podcast, I'm going to share with you just some things that I've learned through post-grad and how you can maybe do this experience a little bit better than I did. And I also just want to share with you just some really awesome scriptures that have been vital to me during this transitional season. So to start things off, I went to college at a little tiny school called Freed-Hardeman University in the middle of nowhere in Tennessee. And this college is like going to church camp every single day. Like, it's crazy. We actually had a curfew at the school. I know, pretty gross. But we had a curfew. It was 12:30 at night. We had to be back in our dorm room. And so I kind of feel like because we had that curfew, everyone was like, oh, we need to stay out until 12:30. Like, we need to be out doing things. And that's kind of how it was. Everyone would just be out doing all this crazy fun stuff until 12:30, like every single night. Didn't matter if it was a school night, a weekend, we were all out. And there was also like a Devo to go to almost every night. Like you could go to some kind of prayer night or worship night or devotional literally every single day of the week if you wanted to. There were a lot of opportunities. I was constantly surrounded by friends and I was just super busy all of the time. I had classes, I had a job, I was married for the last part of school, and I was involved in a lot of different clubs that I loved, and I ran a local jail ministry at the local jail that was in the area of my college town. I just had a lot of things going on that I just really enjoyed and really loved to do. And so my senior year was just really bittersweet because I knew that I was ready to leave college and move on to the next step, but I was also just sad to leave behind the life and community that God had blessed me with for the last few years. It was also kind of odd because so many people were so excited about graduating and were just counting down the days. And I remember one day just telling a friend how I was feeling, and she gave me one of the best pieces of advice that I think that I got in that season. So if you're about to graduate and you feel like, yeah, you're excited to move on to the next step, and there's things that you're excited for, but you're just mourning the loss of your college career and just the fun that you've had for the past 2 years and all the friends that you've made, I totally recommend that you try this. Or if you're in a different transitional season in life where you're hesitant to move on to the next phase because you love the previous phase so much, I also recommend that you do this, even if it's not you graduating high school or graduating college. But what my friend told me to do is she told me to make a list on my phone of all the things that I'm excited for after graduation. Because the truth is, there were a lot of things that I was excited for that were really awesome. Some of the things that I was excited for were like really big, obvious things, like getting to work full time and having more money and not being a broke college student anymore, or getting to have my own house and never having to do homework ever again. That is a really big one for me. Let me just be real. But there are other things that I was excited for that were just smaller and more sweet, like getting to go on dates more with Xavier because we had more money and we could do more bigger things together. Or just getting to have neighbors who live around us and getting to meet them and getting to know them. And so, yeah, I just kind of made a list of different things for myself that I was just looking forward to about graduating. And this was really helpful for me because whenever I was feeling sad or I was just not looking forward to graduating, I could take a look at this list and be like, wow, like there are so many things to look forward to. And yeah, I can mourn the loss of this other season, but this next season is going to be even better. And let me just tell you right now that even though post-grad was hard, it is so much better than being in college. Like, embrace going to this next step because it is a better season. What Xavier and I decided to do after college is we wanted to move to a town in the South that was bigger, but also had a lot of Christians there so that we could be poured into because we're wanting to do international mission work in a few years. And so we decided that what we wanted to do was just have this season of really finding people to pour into us, finding people to learn from. And we had considered a few different cities. We had considered a few different bigger cities in the South, but doors just kept opening in Nashville. As doors kept opening, we kept thinking more and more like, maybe this is where the Lord is calling us to. Like, it's only 2 hours from my family. We have some other friends who are graduating and going to Nashville. There was a really good housing opportunity for us in Nashville. And so as time went on, it was more and more like, okay, something is going on here. Like, these doors keep opening in Nashville. And so ultimately, that's where Xavier and I decided to go. But what we did not have were jobs. And we didn't really have a very large community here in Nashville. And so with that came a lot of different struggles. So when we first moved to Nashville, things were pretty tough. I had just come off of this high, of doing your senior year, kind of being at the top of the totem pole, understanding what I'm supposed to do, understanding like in college I do this is how I study, this is how I make good grades. You just kind of master the season you're in. And so I had just come off of that feeling like I really understood life and the steps that I was supposed to take each day. And I also understood my purpose. So when you're in college, you always have this huge to-do list of things that you need to tackle. And I always had that. And so I knew exactly what I was supposed to do next. And I had short-term goals and I had long-term goals. A lot of time I was just trying to make it through the week, make it through the exams that week. And so those were those short-term goals in front of me. But then I also had these longer-term goals, right? Like I knew that I was in college to get a degree. And so this whole time that you're in school, you have this very clear big goal in front of you and you have much smaller goals that are in your face all the time. And so you don't have to make as many decisions as frequently because you know exactly what you're supposed to do. But as an adult, graduating college, I didn't really know exactly what I was supposed to do. I had this pretty vague, broad degree. I got a degree in communications. And so there were a lot of different directions I could go with that. And it was kind of hard having to decide, who do I want to be? How do I want to spend my time each day? And where do I want to spend my time each day? So not having a clear purpose or a clear direction of what exactly I'm supposed to do was really difficult. And obviously throughout this whole time I knew, my purpose is to follow God and to glorify Him and just rest in Him. But that's really hard when I'm living in this world where there's a lot of things that I can be doing and I'm not exactly sure what it's supposed to be. And ultimately, there are bills to pay too. And so figuring out that is really important. Another really difficult part of post-grad that I've kind of mentioned a little bit already is just not really knowing that many people. So when you're in college, you have all these friends that, you just have deepened relationships with for 4 years. And at Freed Hardeman, it was like we were staying up till midnight 30 each night, hanging out with each other. And so you just get really close to these people because you spend so much time with them. And you just have years and years of developing this deepness with them. And when you move to a new city, unless you have some college friends who are in the area, or maybe you go back home and you have high school friends, you're probably not going to have friendships at that level of deepness. Xavier and I were actually used to people just kind of showing up at our house all the time. We had a little duplex that wasn't super far from campus. Like you could literally see Freed Hardeman from our house. And so people would just show up all the time. I remember this one time in particular when we were just chilling at the house and then we had invited someone to come over and they were hanging out and we were just sitting on the couch talking, hanging out. And then we hear a knock at the door. And so we go and answer the door and it's a couple more friends and we're like, oh, hey, come in. Like it was pretty frequent. Like people would just kind of show up and be like, hey, you guys want to hang out? And so, yeah, we were like, oh, cool. And so a couple friends came in and joined the other one. and we were just doing our thing. And then again, we hear a knock on the door, and there are more friends there to hang out with us. And so it was just this evening of unexpected guests just arriving and just so much joy. Like, we have people who want to come and who want to be with us, and they're all coming at the same time. And that was just such a sweet time and a really good memory for me. But that was not going to happen to us in Nashville. We were not just going to have people show up unannounced and walk into our house. And that was something that was kind of hard for me. I missed having friendships like that where you could just be with one another and you were just comfortable with one another in that way, and you knew that you could just show up. I just really appreciated having friendships like that. But it takes a really, really long time to develop friendships like that. And in college, I feel like it takes a little bit of less time because you're together so much. You have all these hours to spend together. But in the big world, when you're not in school anymore, people are really busy. You have bills to pay, you have jobs to fulfill, other responsibilities. Some people are starting to have kids, you have a house to clean, you have food to make. There's just a lot of responsibilities that come with graduating college. And so you don't get to see your friends as often anymore. Not to mention, you guys are maybe living in different locations. But even if you're making local friends, it's just, you're not able to see them every night until midnight 30 because they're doing their own thing and they have their own things that they need to do. And it doesn't mean that you're not as close of friends, but it does mean that it takes longer to develop a deepness. Another thing that was hard for me in post-grad, and I think is hard for a lot of people, is comparison. So I've heard of some people having trouble with comparison, like comparing to what other people are doing who have graduated with you, or maybe people that you work with who are 5 years ahead of you in their career, just comparing to the people around you. But I really struggled with comparing to myself. And so, like I've mentioned a lot, in my previous season, I had done a lot of things. I had been doing ministry. And now, when I first came to Nashville, I was just kind of hanging out all day, just looking for a job, not really knowing that many people, not having that much to do yet. But I knew the Lord had called me to be there and had called me to this place, but it just looked really different than how it looked before, and I really struggled with that. Another comparison issue I had was just pace of life, and that's something that you have to adjust to in post-grad because things are kind of, yeah, you're busy, but things are slower almost. Like for me, I was looking for a job. I wasn't doing something 40 hours a week yet, and so it was just kind of hard to adjust to that pace of life of like, oh, I'm not jam-packed with things to do all the time anymore. And I had to figure out like how to have hobbies and how to find things that I enjoy that aren't just hanging out with friends all the time, because you do in post-grad, you have a lot more alone time. And so you need to figure out what is important to you to have fun. And now in this season where I do have a full-time job and I'm working 40 plus hours a week, I'm also adjusting to that pace of life of, yeah, I love my job, but there's not a lot of time to do extra things. And I have to be intentional with that time outside of work to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do to fill myself up and to make sure that I'm having a good quality of life. And then the last thing that I want to touch on in this episode, and don't worry, we'll go over a lot more struggles that come from being in this post-grad season later on in later episodes when we talk to others who are in their post-grad season or who have been in that season for a little while. But the last thing that I want to touch on is just the spiritual difference for me. So I went to a Christian university, and like I said, there was a devotional that we could go to every single night and just be around Christians. But that wasn't the case here. I didn't have the context yet. I didn't know where things were happening yet. So it was definitely an adjustment for me to not have as large of a Christian community yet. And I knew that that would come eventually, but it takes time. And I really struggled with not having as many Christians pouring into me all the time anymore. And it wasn't just that I struggled with not having as many Christians to pour into me, but as someone who loves pouring into others, that was a real struggle for me. I had just been a part of this really cool ministry and gotten to see the Lord work in really amazing ways through this ministry when I was at Freed Hardeman. And now in Nashville, I didn't have a ministry that I was plugged into yet. And so that was a struggle for me. And those things just, it takes time to figure out where you're going to end up and where you're going to be serving the Lord. I think another thing that happens in seasons of transition spiritually is you break your routine. And when you break your routine, you start to notice things that you're doing before. And so you spiritually, you may start to question things or notice, like, in this previous season, like, I thought this spiritually and I did this spiritually, but now that things are kind of reset, I'm reevaluating, and spiritually you begin to have a lot of questions, and you may even form some doubts, or you may go through some kind of like period of deconstruction. And that's pretty common, I think, to happen in a period of transition, and people are going to talk about that throughout this season. But that was something that I was going through too. And so spiritually, it's just different in post-grad, and it takes time to get to the place where you were before. But after talking about all those struggles, I just want to let you guys know that it does get better and things do begin to work themselves out. And then you look back and you're like, oh, that was really hard. But in the grand scheme of things, that season of taking time to figure things out and not knowing exactly what I was supposed to do, who my friends were, spiritually, all these things, the things kind of start to sort themselves out after a little while. And the Lord just has a way of timing things so perfectly so that you have the time to learn and grow and be challenged. But then he also provides. He's a provider. And so the Lord did provide for me, and I ended up finding my job in a really odd way. And so when Xavier and I first moved to Nashville, he is actually in grad school right now. And so we had kind of talked, crunched a bunch of numbers. We're very budgety people. And so we spent a lot of time thinking, what do we need to make to be comfortable and not be stressed about money all the time, and also be able to cheerfully give to others? And so we, like I said, kind of crunched the numbers, sat down, talked about it and all the things. And we had decided on a salary that I needed to make. And so when I was looking for jobs, I was looking for jobs within this specific salary range because we had thought that that's what I needed. And I looked for a long time. Like, apparently July is not a great time to find a job in Nashville because a lot of people just weren't really hiring at the time. And it also takes a long time now to get a job. Like, you go through this online application process that might take you like an hour or more to fill out. And then you wait and you do a phone call interview, and then you do like a Zoom interview or Google Chat or something. And then you go in person and you do an interview. And it takes a long time to get to the point where you're actually working and making money now. After about a month of looking for a job, there was finally one where I had done an interview, had done all the things, and they offered me the position. And I was really excited because I had put on my big girl pants and I had negotiated the salary and had asked for even more than what they were offering. And they were like, yes, we absolutely want you to be here. And so we will give you that salary increase. And I was like, this is awesome because this is more than Xavier and I had said we needed to be comfortable. And this is just going to allow us to just bless other people and not have to be as tight in our budgeting. And so I was just really excited about that. And then one day after I had been offered that position and I was just, taking time to think about it, pray about it, I was going through my email inbox and I just noticed that Indeed had sent me an email about a position at a missions company. And I was like, oh, that's kind of crazy. Like, I hadn't even thought about that, like working for a missions organization. And I kind of looked into the job and I was like, well, I already have another job. So, I already have another offer. And so I was like, well, what if I just like put in my application and see what happens? And like a little piece of me was just like, what if this is what I've been waiting for? What if this is what the Lord had in store? And so, I put in my application. I was like, if it is, like, we'll just see what happens. And so I got an email back pretty quickly and scheduled an interview pretty quickly, like the next day, I'm pretty sure, which was really weird to me after this whole month of people taking a really long time to get back to, because that's just how it works now. But this organization, this missions organization, they were so quick. And so I was like, okay. And I did the interview and I was super relaxed throughout the interview because I was like, this is just, I'm just feeling this out and I already have another offer, but this is just kind of like, just seeing what happens. And I just really clicked really well with the person who interviewed me. And I actually was kind of upfront in the interview and I was like, hey, like, I really love what your organization is doing. I love missions. And I think that this is a job that would be really good for me. But also I'm in this position right now where I've been looking for a job for a long time. and have been offered another position. And so how long do you think it will take you guys to make a decision? And I had expected him to say like this super long time. And I was thinking to myself, like, this wouldn't really be possible. Like, I can't take this risk, when Xavier and I have been unemployed for this period of time, and we need to be working and we need to be making money so that we can pay the bills right now. But he was like, oh, maybe like 2 weeks. And that was a super short amount of time. But even then, that was past the date when I needed to accept the other job offer. And another thing about this position is it paid literally less than half of the other job that I was waiting on. And so I was like, there's no way. And so I just kind of, after the interview, I was like, there's not really a way that this can work out. Like, this is a really cool thing, and it'd be cool if things all added up, but they're just not working out. And so I just probably need to accept the other job offer. And so I talked to Xavier about it later and just kind of talked, and he was kind of like, Hailey, this might be what the Lord is calling you to. Like, this position is just, there's so many things about the description and so many things about what your passions are that just line up. Like, this may be what the Lord has called you to. And I was like, Xavier, what do you mean? Like, we said we needed to make this much money and we're gonna accept a position that pays less than half of that? Like, how is that even possible? And he was just kind of like, I think we can make this work, like, especially if it's from the Lord. And so this is kind of crazy. And I don't know if I recommend doing this, but it's something I definitely did. And I have no regrets because it worked out. But I hadn't even been offered the job at the mission organization yet. And I decided to turn down the other job offer where I was making where the salary was set at more than double this position at the mission organization. And I know that's kind of crazy because I hadn't even been offered the job at the mission organization yet. And I didn't even know if that was a possibility for me. But I felt like I knew. I felt like this was just too perfect for it to not be from the Lord. And the timing was just so perfect. And all the waiting I had done had finally made sense. So I risked it because I just felt like it was what the Lord had called me to. And the answer was it definitely was, because I did get offered the position. And it was a really stressful couple of days as I was waiting to hear back from the mission organization, and I had not accepted the other job offer. But it was well worth it because now I work at a job that I really love. And the Lord is just so good and so sweet because, as I had mentioned, this job paid less than half as much as the other job was offering. And I was just faithful to what I felt like he was calling me to. And in being faithful, I was also offered another part-time position at a church that is near mine and Xavier's house that would all be remote and doing work that I really love, content creation and social media management. And this job would just supplement some of the salary that we had given up. It was just really cool to see the Lord's plan just play out like that. And it was so cool just like seeing the trust that Xavier had in me and in the Lord during that in-between time. And it was really cool just trusting God and trusting my understanding of what he was wanting me to do and just leaning into that and then seeing his faithfulness on the other side. And now I have 2 jobs that I love so much. And it's so much better than being at the other position I would have been at because it would have been great too, and the Lord can do everything, but these positions are just so much better for this season and what Xavier and I had intended to do with this season because I'm getting to learn about missions and church work every single day, and I love it so much, and I'm getting to grow up professionally in areas that I'm really excited about. So now I want to move into things that I've just learned in this post-grad season. And by far, one of the biggest things I've learned is that God's plan is not only better, but it's best. And so I say that because Xavier and I had set up these expectations for ourselves and what moving to Nashville would look like and what our salary would look like and what my job would look like. But then the Lord had something so much better in store for us, and something that is so much better than I could have even asked or imagined on my own because I didn't even know a position like this existed. I didn't think about working for a mission organization. That wasn't something that had even crossed my mind, but it's so just perfect. I don't use that word a lot, but it's just so perfect for what Xavier and I had been intending to do in this season. And so, yeah, that's just something that I've learned, that God's plan is just, it's just the best ever, and so much better than, like I said, than I could ever ask or imagine. Talking about all of this God's plan for your life and all these things, I just kind of want to clarify, God's plan can be really specific for some people, but for some people, it's not as specific. And so I 100% believe that the Lord put things in place for me and Xavier to come here at this time, and for me to get this position, and that he had a plan, and that even he's going to use this season to better another season that we're going to step into. And we think right now that that's going to be international mission work, but that might be something different later. And so, yeah, I guess I'm saying I 100% believe that the Lord intended these very specific things for my life, but that isn't always how it is. Sometimes God's will for your life is just follow him. And that can look like a lot of different things, and you have a lot of different options in front of you. And I do think even if I had chosen something else, the Lord would work through that. But in a little bit, we're going to be talking about Moses and the Israelites. And in thinking about this topic, I think this kind of relates because Moses had a very specific plan for his life. God made Moses a very specific prophet with very specific things that God intended for him to do. But the rest of the Israelites, they didn't always have really specific directions like this. Like, their directions were to just follow God. And so that is the case with us too today. Some people are given really specific directions, like do mission work or become a preacher or, some kind of specific ministry. But then other people, they aren't always given these specific directions. There's a lot of ways they can go. So I just wanted to clarify that for people who maybe struggle with understanding what God's direction is for them in their life. Like, sometimes it's not super specific like it was for me in this season, and that's okay. And you can do a lot of really great things then too. Another really important thing that I have learned in this post-grad season is that it's really important to do things that are just fun for you. So even if you're like me and you really love your job or your jobs, it can be easy to forget to do things you enjoy. Because no matter how much you love your work is still work, and you need to rest from that. And it's really important to learn how to rest and how to fill yourself up. Before, when I was in college, a lot of the things that I would do for fun would just be with other people. And so it was difficult for me to figure out who am I and how do I have fun on my own. Something that I actually did after graduating high school that has affected me for a while now is I was working like 50 plus hours a week my first year of college. So I actually started college at a state school called Murray State University, and then I finished my last 3 years at Freed-Hardeman. But I was working 50 plus hours a week. I was taking like 12 hours of classes, and so I was busy. Like, my time was scheduled to the max. Like, I don't even know how I functioned in that season, and I'm really glad that life is different now. But I just kind of was realizing, like, I don't have any fun, and I don't really have time for fun. And so I was like, I feel like I need to do something kind of crazy to have fun. And so I thought of like, what would be some like crazy wild things that people can spontaneously do for fun. And I was like, well, I could cut my hair, because I had really long hair at that time. Like, it was all the way down my back. I was like, I could cut my hair like short, that would be kind of crazy and fun. And then I was like, but like, what if I bought a fish? And so I thought about it for some time, and I was like, do I want to get one fish or two fish? Because it'd be special to have one fish, because then it's like, this is the one fish that I have, and we have a special relationship. Like, this is Bob, I'm Hailey, and we're besties. And like, it's just one, like having one child, like you get to pour into one child more. But then I was also like, but I don't want the fish to be lonely because I'm busy all the time. I just don't want to leave it here alone all day while I'm working and going to school and it just not have a friend. And so I was like, maybe I should get two fish. And, I went back and forth for a long time. And I called some friends and was like, what do you think? And was really like seeking wisdom about this topic. But, kind of silly right now. But I was like, I think I'll just get one. I think I'd like it to be that special relationship. And so I went to the fish store. I bought a fish tank. I bought all the things all in one day. And I came home with 14 fish and a frog that day. This was just something that I did to bring joy into my life. And it totally worked. Like, I didn't have a lot of time, But when I did come home and I did have, even if it was just like 5 minutes hanging out with my fish, feeding them, watching them grow, watching them hang out with each other, it was something that I could do that was just for me. It wasn't work. It wasn't taking care of someone else. It wasn't homework. It was just doing something that I enjoy for the sake of enjoying it. This fish story is kind of a crazy, weird, silly story. But what I'm trying to say is no matter how little time you feel like you have, it is so important to do something for fun just for you. And now in this season, yeah, I still have fish, but I have time to do more fun things by myself. And so I've learned that I really love to cook, and I love to work out, and I love to be outside and just be outside in nature. And so those are things that I try to do. I try to do at least one of those things each day. And I also, before I leave for work in the morning, I feed my fish and I talk to them a little bit, and I'm like, bye fish, have a good day. And it's just like incorporating little things like this into your life so that you're not just walking around working all day. It's so important. And these things can look different for each person. And so I just encourage you to go and find things that you enjoy doing by yourself, and find little ways to, like, I've heard someone say, like, romanticize your life. Like, even if it's having like a fancy cup that you use when you drink your coffee in the morning, like, just find little things like that to just bring joy into your life. So moving on to another thing that I learned in this post-grad season, something that is so important to understand is that you, for the most part, you can pick your pace of life. So this is different for people who have made commitments already to their post-grad season, but for someone who is like me and they just graduated and they're not going to grad school, or they don't have like a med program that they're entering, for the most part, you can pick your pace of life. And I think a lot of times we let our time control us when really we get to choose what we do with our time. And so here are some examples. Like, you can pick how much you are working. A lot of times we can be pressured to feel like, oh, we have to work 40 hours a week, or some people are even working 50 to 60 hours a week. And we can feel this pressure of like, oh, we need to do this and we need to make this money. But if that's where you're at right now and you're feeling overwhelmed in that, I just want to invite you to maybe think about not doing that anymore. And if you're doing that and you enjoy that, then that's great. There's nothing wrong with doing that. What I'm talking about here is sometimes we can go around and we can be like, oh, I'm so busy, I'm so stressed all the time, but there's just so many things that I have to do. And so post-grad is a good time to think about, what do I actually have to do and what things do I actually want to invite into my life? Because there are a lot of good things that you can do. I think especially being in a city, there are so many opportunities and so many events to go to and so many people to meet and so many ministries to be involved in. But I have to pick what I want my pace of life to be. And that has to be something that I'm content with, something that I'm not necessarily comfortable. You don't have to be comfortable all the way. Like, you should challenge yourself some. But if you're stressed to the max and you're not enjoying the things that you're doing, and you're not doing the things you're doing well because you're so stressed about how busy you are, then post-grad is a really good time to evaluate that. And so things like what job you have, or, things like how clean your house is, like these things that just we feel like we have to do. Like, if you feel like you have to scrub the bathroom floor every week, or if you feel like the dishes always need to be done and so you're stressed because you're so busy because you're doing dishes all the time, or, like those seem like small things, but like for me, I've just noticed that I will make myself feel busy about things and stress about things that are only important to me and in the grand scheme of things aren't necessary. I just want to invite you right now, if you're stepping into a transitional season, to just evaluate how busy you've been, how you felt about how busy you've been, and just think about how you want your time to be and how you want to feel about all of the tasks that you have. And I just want to encourage you to know that you control your time and your time doesn't control you. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that. And I hope that we can have another episode later just going deeper into that a little bit more. But I felt like it was important to mention here because post-grad is a time where you are picking what things to invite into your life. Another thing I wanted to talk about today is how I've learned in post-grad to just see the people who are right in front of you. And so in college, you have all these people who are around you who are your age and have a lot of similar interests as you. And there's a lot of people to pick from. And so I don't mean this to come off wrong, but like you can be kind of choosy in who your friends are, and there are a lot of options. And like that sounds kind of bad, but that's just how it is in college. Like there's a lot of options of people to be friends with. But when you are post-grad and you're not around people who are in the same major as you all the time, or in the same clubs as you all the time, or even the same age as you all the time, things are just a little bit different. And so in being in this season, I've noticed that I have really appreciated when I have gone out of my comfort zone and been friends with people who are more different than me. And that's just something that you have to do more when you're an adult. And so like becoming friends with your neighbors who are maybe retired or a lot older than you. Like that's something I would encourage you to do, because those people are right there, right in front of you. You can just appreciate them in a different way now. Like if you're sitting around and you're thinking, like, I don't know how to find people and I don't know where to find friends, I think it's really important to just think about the people who are already in your life. Like, who are you seeing daily? And can they be your friend? And so if you say hi to your neighbor every day, and if there are people who are like reaching out to you, like who are maybe just different than the type of person you've been friends with before, like post-grad is a time to embrace those relationships and understand that there's a lot to learn from people who are different from you or who are in a different season of life than you. But then I would also like to say that it is important to intentionally build community. And so it's important to go out there and find friends who will encourage you and who you do have things in common with. And so some things that I have found to be really fruitful is becoming a part of a Bible study group. So a little after I moved to Nashville, I became a part of a group of girls who they met on every Thursday, and we would just study the Bible together, and we would pray for one another and talk. And this is something that really shifted my spiritual and emotional state in this post-grad season, because I had a group of community to pour into me and to pour into, and that's something that's so important. There's a lot of things that you can find online, and so I found this Bible study from a mutual friend, but there are other people who are at this Bible study who found it from a Facebook post. So going online and looking at what is offered around you is something that I definitely suggest. I've also become part of a worship group that meets once a month, and they just worship together and pray over one another and praise the Lord together. And this is something that is also online, that people find online, and there are prayer groups online, and there's just so much that's out there online, especially if you're in a city. And so if you find yourself sitting at home a lot thinking, wow, I just wish that I had community, then I would definitely suggest looking online and seeing what is out there and taking that initiative. And it's hard to go to things for the first time when you don't know anyone, but especially if it's like a Bible study group or something Christian based, then those people are going to be so happy that you're there. And if you're like me and you're used to being the person who is inviting other people in and ministering to other people, it's especially kind of weird to let someone else minister to you and let someone else make you feel comfortable. But it's something that you need in the post-grad season because you are in such unfamiliar surrounding and you just don't know people as well. Another thing that we need to be intentional about in the post-grad season is the friends that you want to stay in touch with. And so these are friends who are from previous seasons of life, like maybe you grew up with them or maybe you went to college with them. There's a lot of different friends that we have from previous seasons of life when you're in the post-grad season. But this is also about new friends that you're making. You have to decide, like, how much time am I going to pour into people who I've been in previous seasons with, and how much time am I going to pour into these new friends that I have here and now? Because what you don't want to do is keep, spending all this energy staying in touch with your old friends who maybe live in a different location or, just aren't there with you right then, and you don't focus your energy on also making new friends in the new city or town that you're in. So it's important to pour into both, and it's also important to understand that some friends who you had in previous seasons, you're not going to be as close in this next season, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean that you weren't good friends then, and that doesn't mean that you don't care about each other now. It just means that sometimes friendships shift, and it doesn't take away from what you had or how much you guys care about each other. It just means that things are different now, and that's okay. But then there are those friends that we have from previous seasons who we want to keep in contact with, and we want to keep seeing regularly, and we want to be really close to them still. And so some things that I have done that have been really fun is just find creative ways to stay in contact with each other, either through like text or social media. And so I have a text group chat with a couple of girls from college now where all we do is we just send pictures of food to each other. And so it's so fun because like I said earlier, I really like to cook. And so I'll cook a meal and I'll make it look super cute and put all the things together. And then I'll take a pic and send it to my friends. It'll just start a conversation, and then they'll send a picture of what they had for dinner that night. And it's just something really like kind of silly and simple, but we have had so many good conversations that have sprung from that. And I feel really close to them still because I'm talking to them really frequently. And so maybe come up with something like silly and fun like that. Like if you and your friends you're trying to stay in touch with, if you guys all like cooking, you can do something like that. Or if there's another hobby that you guys have in common, like just sending pictures of that or like bringing that up frequently. Another thing I've done to keep in contact with friends from previous seasons is having FaceTime lunch dates with them at work. And so sometimes it can be hard to have a phone call after work because there are a lot of things that I need to do when I get home. I need to make dinner, or maybe I have plans with other friends who live here. And so scheduling a phone call after work has been kind of difficult for me. So something I've done to combat that is doing a FaceTime date during lunch while I'm at work. And it's just been so fun. And it's a super cool way to quickly get to catch up with one another and check in. And so I've really enjoyed doing that. And if you're having trouble scheduling in phone calls with people, I would encourage you to do that as well. Another thing that's really important if you're trying to keep in contact with friends from previous seasons is plan to visit one another. And so sometimes that can be really difficult, but it is really worth it. And it's really cool to just get to be in person with one another again. And then also inviting people to come visit you. Because it's kind of hard to like invite yourself like, hey, friend from high school or friend from college, like, is it okay if I come spend the night with you and your new husband and your baby for like 3 days? Like that's like kind of hard to do. And so creating that space for people to be welcomed into your home is really important. And be like, hey girl, like, I'd love for you to come to Nashville and hang out with us for a couple of days. Like that shows that you really care about them and that you still want them in your life. And one person has to be the initiator. And so if you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I wish that I was still in contact with these people from this previous season, like you need to take that step and ask those questions and make those invitations. Because the other person is probably sitting thinking like, oh, I would love to be friends with this person too still. Another thing that's just really simple that you can use for friends who you're here with in this season and from previous seasons is just sending a simple text and just say, hey, like, I miss you, or hey, how's it going? Or hey, like, I did this today and it made me think of you. And something that someone did to Xavier a couple weeks ago that I really learned a lot from was they texted him and they were like, hey, Xavier, miss you, bro. Like, I would really love to hang out with you this week, but I'm just really busy. And so I just wanted to let you know, like, I'd like to hang out with you this week, but like this adulting life is busy, and so we just don't have time this week. And that just made him feel so like cared for and appreciated. And like at first it was kind of weird. It was like, oh, I want to hang out with you, but I can't. But then like thinking about it a step further, it's like, oh, I want you to know that I appreciate this friendship, and I wish that we did have more time so we could spend time together. But right now I just can't. So I've started checking in with friends like that, like, hey, girl, like, I really miss you, and I really wish we could just have a movie date together tonight, but I have a lot going on, and so I hope that we can do this when things are a little less busy for both of us. So yeah, those are just some things that I have learned from the post-grad season, and things that I hope are helpful to those of you who are in a transitional season, whether it be post-grad or some other kind of transitional change. But now I want to go over some scriptures that were really vital to me during this season. So the first one is from Ephesians 6, verses 14 through 16. And it says, stand therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, with which you are able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. And so this verse might seem kind of random, but it is from Ephesians 6, like I said, and this is the passage where Paul is just talking about putting on the armor of God. And the part that just really stood out to me when I read it in the midst of my really hard post-grad struggles is taking the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. And so this was just really helpful to me because there were a lot of like uncertainties going on in this time, and there was a lot of like mental struggles from just this transitional season. And it helped me to remember that no matter what is going on internally or externally, the armor of God is strong enough to counter anything that the devil tosses my way. And so this may seem really simple to some of you, and to some of you it may not, but I just pray that either way, this verse is just a reminder to you. God is strong enough to counter anything that Satan tosses your way. And then another passage that has been really helpful to me is Exodus 14, verses 10 through 14. So the context of this passage is that God's chosen people, the Israelites, they had been enslaved by the Egyptians for a lot of years, and they ended up fleeing from the Egyptians, and they were being led by Moses away from them. But then after they fled from the Egyptians started chasing them with all of their chariots and all of these crazy weapons, and it was really scary. And so this is what it says in verses 10 through 14. It says, "And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were very afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, 'Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us to bring us up out of Egypt?'" And so they're asking, we were in this season before where we were in Egypt, and we were in slavery, and that was bad, but why are we here now in the wilderness, and we're gonna die? Why are we in this new place if we're just gonna die anyway? And they say, "Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, 'Let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians'?" They're we didn't want to go through this change. We wanted to keep serving the Egyptians. Why are we here? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness." And Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. They will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace." Okay, I just want to read again what Moses said. He said, "Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace." So this really stood out to me because, first of all, the Israelites were in a season, and then they were in a new season, and they were struggling in this new season because they were really afraid. It didn't seem like God was going to work out what he had called them to. And so they were doubting God. And then Moses calls them and says, "Do not be afraid." And it really stood out to me that he said, "Stand still." So they didn't even have to do anything. They just had to sit still and wait. And then it said that the Lord would fight for them and hold their peace. And I believe that this passage has been true for me in this season. And so in a season of waiting, in a season where I am waiting and trying to be poured into more than I was in a different season, which is the case for a lot of people in post-grad, like we've talked about. It's really hard to be still. And we can sometimes try to control our situation and try to make it better on our own, when really what we're needing is the Lord, and we're just needing to be still and wait for him. So yeah, that's a little bit about my post-grad season and the things I struggled with, the things I learned, and how the Lord has just been pruning me and teaching me throughout this season. And yeah, it was really hard at the beginning, but now I just love this season so much, and it's one of my favorite seasons yet. And I just really love it because I get so much precious time with Xavier in this really sweet place, and I get to connect with old friends and make new friends, and it's just so fun. And I get to visit my family more often, and they're the church family that I really love here, and I have these jobs that I love, and I just keep learning more and more about the Lord each day. And so I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts about this second episode of the Pinkfish podcast, and I would love to learn, if you were in post-grad, what has your experience been like? And if you're about to step into post-grad and you have any questions, I'd love for you to reach out to me and ask me those questions. Thank you for listening to the Pinkfish podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a like, a thumbs up, subscribe, share, and all the things. I pray this episode has just met you right where you are and has encouraged you to draw closer to the Lord. Have a great rest of your day, friend.